All right, imagine that you're out shopping for one of your kids, and you've heard them go on and on about the new game system that has just come out. So you're in the store and you see it there on the shelf, and you just think about it, and you know the smile it will bring to their face brings a smile to your face. And now it's expensive, okay, and so you know it's a financial sacrifice. But every now and then you like to kind of get an extravagant gift to give to your kids. So you purchase it, you bring it home, you present it as a gift to them, and of course, I mean, they're beyond excited, giving you a dozen hugs, a dozen hyperactive thank yous. You see them run immediately to their room and then go to hook the game system up and playing it with just, extreme focus in what they're doing. About an hour or two later, you go by the room and see the game they're playing. You just try to ask them a question about the game. They're like, I can't talk right now. And then they kind of forget that you're standing there. Maybe a couple months later, you go by and you're like, hey, the family, we want to go out, grab a bite to eat, kind of spend some time together as a family. And they beg you that they can stay and not have to go so that they can keep playing the game. Well, a couple months after that, you notice you barely see them anymore, and in a weird way, they kind of seem less happy and less content than before they got the game system. So how can such a good gift, a nice gift, go so wrong? Well, it happens because, and it happens a lot, the gift became more important than the giver. Okay, the beauty was not so much in the thing itself that was given, but in the love that brought about the desire to give the gift. The gift wasn't wrong or evil. It's just that when the gift becomes central, the relationship that gave it meaning fades to the background. As we continue in our study on the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon is going to be talking about the emptiness or the meaninglessness of chasing pleasure and entertainment in our lives in order to find meaning and purpose in life. But before we jump into that text today, there's a couple things I want us just to review from last Sunday, because these two concepts are so important as we move forward in the book and some of the different things Solomon is going to talk about. So there is a phrase that Solomon uses 29 times throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. It's the title of our series, Under the Sun. So it's kind of important to know kind of what he's talking about when he uses this phrase. So King Solomon, all right, the wisest king who has ever lived, God gave him that wisdom. We read about that last Sunday. Well, he writes Ecclesiastes from a viewpoint that for the most part kind of leaves out heaven's perspective or the difference that God makes in everything. So Ecclesiastes describes what life is like under the sun as we seek meaning and purpose in things apart from God. Kind of life under the sun is what our experience is under the curse of sin in a lot of ways. And Solomon also uses the word meaningless. Some translations have vanity. Uses that word 38 times in the book. And just like the phrase under the sun, it's good to have kind of a fuller understanding of what he's talking about here. It's a tricky word. The original Hebrew word is a tricky word to translate into English because it's kind of hard to capture the full meaning. So a good way to think about it is a word picture. When you see this word meaningless or vanity, think smoke, think vapor. And what Solomon is saying that, look, the things that we often chase in life to try to find purpose and meaning in, it's like trying to grab smoke. He said, it looks like something solid. It looks like something you can get a hold of, but when you grasp it, it just slips through your fingers. So that's kind of the idea he's talking about here. So throughout Ecclesiastes, what Solomon goes through and he does, he gives reality checks all along. And he focuses in, again, on the things that sometimes we look to, or sometimes we try these things and try to find meaning and purpose in life just in them. And he kind of gives us a good reality check on those things. So open your Bibles to Ecclesiastes chapter 2, and we're going to be starting in verse 1 as we continue here. Look at what Solomon has to say. So he continues writing. He says, I said to myself, come now, I'll test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness, and what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks, planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. A little commentary here. Solomon is a product of his time. Slavery was as natural as breathing in the ancient world. So that's why we see that and we're kind of shocked by it. But it was a normal thing then. And just because the Bible records something or describes something doesn't mean that God approves of that action. We're sinful and we make bad choices. But Solomon is saying that he did this. I also own more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet, when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. All right, so Solomon in this passage, he's kind of like a lab rat, and that's kind of how he's going about it. It's almost like an experiment to him. Let me try everything I can under the sun and the sensation that they provide, or the satisfaction they might provide. He tried laughter. He tried wine, women, vacation homes, building projects, any toy that money could buy in his day. Seems like what he did. And did you notice it says that is 2 times in that passage, it said, my wisdom continued to guide me. My wisdom stayed with me. What do you mean by that? Well, it meant the whole time he was doing this little experiment, he took notes to write, hey, what does this really provide? What does this really give us in life? And his conclusion was, in the end, nothing. It's kind of meaningless, like chasing after the wind. It wouldn't be hard to make a case that America's cultural obsession with pleasure and entertainment can also end in meaninglessness, can also almost become a substitute religion. I read a story this week about a preacher who kind of became convicted of this in his own life in a specific area, and I just thought it was interesting, and I want to read what he said. He said, a few years ago, one of my friends traveled to India on a mission trip. After he returned, he was excited to show me the pictures and tell me about his journey. It's always interesting to see the everyday lives of people from other cultures. My friend had a picture of what was essentially the family room in an Indian home. The centerpiece, what we would think of as the mantle, featured a carved idol sitting there. And my friend pointed out every seat in the room was carefully arranged so that it was facing this idol. And I kind of shook my head, the preacher said, in sadness about this, thinking that an idol was at the center of the family's home. This was the center of their life. Well, a few hours later, I walked in the front door of my house, he said, and I kicked back in the recliner. I grabbed the TV remote, and then it kind of hit me. My eyes scanned the room slowly, and sure enough, every seat in our living room was carefully positioned to face the 50-inch flat screen TV that was sitting on, guess where? My mantle. And maybe you're thinking, come on, Eric. Worshiping that's a substitute religion for us. Aren't you taking this idea a little bit too far? You can take this too far, but consider this. Consider that the average American watches more than 4.5 hours of television a day. In the average American home, there is a screen of some type on for more than 8 hours a day. And with the rise of streaming services like Netflix and YouTube and Hulu and so many others like them, binge watching shows has become, commonplace. It's more culturally acceptable now than it's ever been. It's common for shows to release an entire season in one day, 10 to 15 episodes all in one day, because they know people are going to plan watch parties that'll last for an entire weekend. This is the world we live in. Now, don't get me wrong. Okay, I'm not anti-pleasure. I'm not anti-entertainment. I'm just wondering if we've gone from enjoying it properly to it becoming so central in our lives in an unhealthy way. And in a sense, maybe we're kind of worshiping it. Let me give you another scenario. People show up at church hours early. They arrange their schedules to make sure that nothing is going to get in the way of this. And throughout the week, they talk about, what happened on the previous Sunday as they anticipate what's going to take place at the worship service the coming Sunday. There's all-day talk shows on the radio that are devoted to last week's service and breaking down everything that happened. There's even a show on TV called Church Center, and it shows highlight clips of what happened at churches the previous Sunday all throughout the week. When Sunday comes, members start loading into their cars, their trucks, their SUVs. Again, hours before the service starts, because if they don't do that and they get there a little late, they're going to have to park 3 miles away and they may not get a good seat. At church that Sunday morning, there are vehicles parked as far as the eye can see, and people have these elaborate spreads that they bring out. There's grills and there's lawn chairs. They even got massive TVs and satellite dishes that help them see what's happening in worship services around the country before the one that they attend that morning. It's really nice weather that Sunday, but not that it matters. Rain, sleet, snow, blazing heat, they are going to be there no matter what. So it's time for the service to start. So the masses begin filing into the sanctuary, and they're so excited and they're pumped up and they're giving each other high fives. After several hours of being there, people start looking at their watches and they're all thinking the same thing. I hope the sermon goes into overtime. I'm sure you're picking up on my not so subtle analogy here. The scenario I just described to you as I described it, that sounds crazy. That sounds crazy to us. But if you take out the word church and you put in a sport, it's completely normal. It's totally sane. How do we keep pleasure and entertainment in its proper place? Well, here's kind of some things to think about. Kind of like that preacher said. Discover what the chairs of your heart are aligned around. What is it that our lives orbit around? What are the locked-in dates, activities, events that nothing can affect, that nothing can change and touch in any way? Now, again, I want to be careful here because you can turn this legalistic really quick. My point is not to create just this big set of rules in an area of life that God never intended there to be. And I'm not saying that all pleasure and entertainment is evil. Far from it. The things that often bring us pleasure and entertainment are gifts from God. I mean, after all, how can we not be entertained by God's creation? How can we avoid the conclusion it brought God great pleasure to create the universe? What's the refrain that we see over and over again in Genesis chapter 1? And God saw all that he had made, and it was good. How do we think he intends us to respond to a rainbow or a mountain range or a seashore? He didn't just give us this bare, functional place to scrape by in and survive in. He placed us in a world of wonders and gifts from him. If pleasure and entertainment is wrong, why did God make snow so much fun? Why do people in every human culture have the ability to laugh, have the ability to be amused? It's because God is a God of joy. And he wants us to experience joy through what he has made, through the gifts that he has given, the abilities that he's given us to create good things. Think of Jesus, who used stories so much in his teaching and his preaching. Those parables are so effective and powerful in part because they are entertaining to listen to. So what's the problem with pleasure and entertainment then? Well, Solomon would say, nothing, except when we try to make it something that it was never meant to be. When we try to make it meet a need and fulfill something it was never meant to fulfill. So Solomon gives us a heads up on where chasing pleasure and entertainment for its own end usually leads us, and that is a bait and switch. And it's a bait and switch that goes all the way back to the very beginning. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden. But God did say, you must not eat from fruit of the tree that's in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." "You will not certainly die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened. You'll be like God, knowing good and evil." When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food, was pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. And the rest is a sad history leading to our current state of living life under the sun. Our spiritual enemy loves to twist what is true. Loves to twist what is true. He loves to twist what God has created as good gifts that he wants us to enjoy, that he wants us to experience pleasure with when they're within their right boundaries. And our enemy takes those and he twists them and he turns them into weapons to tempt us with, weapons that he hopes we will use and end up destroying our own lives with. He promises us the sky, and he gives us the mud instead. And if he can trap us in his lies and schemes about what pleasure and entertainment can do for us, then food and drink become unquenchable appetites. Sex becomes shame and brokenness. Possessions become burdens that keep us up at night. And entertainment just becomes restless boredom. We can never get enough. If he can trap us in his lies, we start to seek amusements so we don't have to think about anything. We start to smoke it, shoot it, embrace it, chug it, because we want to forget, not remember, the giver of all good and perfect gifts. So how do we not let gifts become something the giver never intended them to be? Read about an American Christian who went on a short-term mission trip to Haiti. And he had some friends who'd gone on a similar trip, and they told him that, hey, when you go in the church you're going to be working with, he said their services on Sunday a lot of times will last 2 to 3 hours. Now, any preacher in America knows if your service goes longer than 45 minutes, you're in trouble. All right, so, and you better make sure that 45 minutes is packed with a lot of different elements. Better be music in there and video and multimedia and all this kind of stuff to keep people's attention, even just for 45 minutes. So when the guy got to Haiti, he spoke with the Haitian preacher there, and he just was comparing the huge differences between their worship services and how much longer they usually worship together. And he just asked him, he said, how is it that the Haitian people are able to worship for so much longer? And the Haitian preacher just kind of laughed and he said, well, brother, in Haiti, there's nothing else to do. Now that's funny, but at the same time, aren't we struck by the weight of that answer? God does not have to compete against as many distractions in their lives. Now, that's not to say they don't have any. It's not to say they don't have things that compete for the throne of their hearts with God. They do. Things that they face there that we don't face here. But our situation is obviously very different. You think about it like a coin. On one side of that coin, we are very blessed to have access to many comforts, conveniences, pleasures, entertainment. On the opposite side of that coin, though, those things can become distractions for us. They can begin to compete for first place in our hearts when it comes to God. So again, how do we make sure pleasure and entertainment stay within the boundaries that God created for them? I'm not saying we need to go back to the Stone Age, but maybe we should go Haitian every now and then. Take a media and entertainment fast. from time to time. Other than for work requirements, which I know some people have, and they've got to have this stuff on all the time because they're on call for one or different reasons. But other than for work requirements, try unplugging every now and then from screens, notifications, doom scrolling, endless television show watching, 24/7 news cycle, and the like. One surefire way to gauge how much these things have control over our lives is to go a day or two without them. And if we start to twitch in 30 minutes, then we know something's probably out of whack here. And again, the idea of doing this isn't just so you can say, oh man, I just look at my discipline, look at my willpower here. The idea is to use that time where we might be overindulging in those things and use that time with God, with family, with friends, at a deeper level. Another good question to ask ourselves is, what are my favorite forms of entertainment? Spend some time thinking about, our kind of leisure diet. Is it filled with just mindless junk food? Or do we try to watch high-quality inspirational films, read well-written books, listen to edifying, encouraging music, look for intelligent TV shows that make us think? Are we consuming things that will help us learn something new, grow closer to God, learn a new skill? If you want to know how to do anything, there's an instructional video for it on YouTube. Okay, seriously, you can, at a basic level, you can kind of learn how to do anything. Now, of course, we're going to have those days where it's been a long day and we just want to go home and kick back and watch something mindless. That's fine up to a point. There's place in life for relaxation through various forms of entertainment. But the question I think we need to constantly ask ourselves is the empty, mindless entertainment or pleasure-seeking out of control in my life? Is it creating a spiritual void in my life? One more question. When and why do I overindulge? Are we eating it, drinking it, watching it, or doing whatever activity is going to give us that sensation so that we can try to cover a wound? Or that's just how I have to deal with the daily frustrations of life? When life goes wrong, is our first impulse to turn to pleasure, turn to entertainment, overindulge in it, instead of taking those cares, those concerns, those things to the foot of the cross and giving them to God? Think about the times of day you might tend to do this. Maybe it's coming home from work. Maybe it's late at night after everybody else has gone to bed. Identify those times of the day when we tend to overindulge in these areas. And instead of doing that at those times, try to think of some spiritual habits you can start to practice there. Prayer, scripture reading, Bible study, whatever it might be. Some spiritual disciplines that you're going to say, this is what I'm going to do. At those times, I'm tempted to turn to these other things. On one occasion, Jesus was teaching his disciples, and he told them this story. He said, when an impure spirit comes out of a person, it goes through arid places seeking rest and does not find it. Then it says, I will return to the house I left. When it arrives, it finds the house swept clean and put in order. Then it goes and takes 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they go in and live there. And the final condition of that person is worse than the first. Cleaning out our lives, putting things in order, that's good. But if we leave that space empty, after maybe we've gotten rid of some bad habits or get rid of some destructive forces in our life, if we leave that space empty and we don't replace it with spiritual habits and disciplines, then that destructive force a lot of times can come back and fill that empty space, and many times it comes back worse than the first. Again, Solomon said, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, what I toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. We are made for God. and until He becomes our greatest pleasure in life, all the other pleasures in this world will not satisfy. And we'll probably overindulge in them and use them in ways they were never intended to be used. 15 centuries ago, a great Christian thinker named Augustine, he said it this way. Same thing, he said it this way. Our hearts are restless until they find rest in Thee. Find your rest and satisfaction in your Creator, in God. Make God your greatest pleasure in life. And if we will strive for that, then more than likely, we will not let the gifts become greater than the giver.